The click of the pen echoed in the silent glass-walled conference room, sealing the end of a 15-year marriage. Marcus looked up, a thin, satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He pushed the papers across the mahogany table toward his ex-wife, Serafina. He believed he had won. He'd just discarded the woman he saw as a burden, securing his assets, his future, and his freedom, leaving her with scraps. But as Marcus watched his wife leave, he was oblivious to the man waiting for her downstairs. A man in a car worth more than the entire settlement. A man who knew her true value. The signature wasn't an end. It was the trigger for her real life to begin. The air in the offices of Hartwell, Dean and Associates was refrigerated to an inhuman chill, a perfect match for the atmosphere at the table. It was the 43rd floor, and the view of the city was sharp and unforgiving. Serafina Hayes stared at the watermark on the divorce decree. It was a stylized set of scales, perfectly balanced. The irony was so bitter it almost made her laugh. "If you're quite finished admiring the letterhead, Serafina," Marcus chimed in, his voice oozing a patronizing smoothness. He tapped his own pen, a ridiculously thick gold-nibbed Mont Blanc, against the table. "We don't have all day. Some of us have meetings to get to." His lawyer, a slick man named Harrison, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Hayes, your counsel has already advised you. This is the final agreed-upon settlement. It is, I must add, exceptionally generous." Serafina's lawyer, a tired-looking woman named Gwen, shifted in her seat. "Serafina," she whispered, "just sign. It's over. We can't fight him on the business assets clause anymore. It's done." Generous. The word was a slap. Marcus was keeping the 5-bedroom house in the suburbs. He was keeping the stock portfolio, the pension, the 401k, and the art collection. He was keeping the company he'd built, the company she'd named. Serafina was getting a one-time lump sum that wouldn't cover 2 years of rent in a decent neighborhood, plus 1 year of alimony. After that, she was on her own. "It's just business, Sarah," Marcus said, leaning back. His suit was new, a custom Tom Ford, and it pulled tightly across his chest. He'd been working out. He was already building his new life, and its centerpiece was his 22-year-old assistant, Kenzie. "You never understood the business," Serafina said, her voice quiet. It was the first thing she'd said in an hour. Marcus laughed. "What, the charity balls, the dinner parties? Honey, I appreciated the support, I really did. You were a great hostess. But let's be real. You haven't worked a day since we got married. You have no idea what it takes to build something." This was the final insult. The one that cut deeper than the infidelity, deeper than the gaslighting. He hadn't just ignored her contributions. He had erased them. She remembered the late nights hunched over his spreadsheets while he slept. She remembered the proposals she'd helped him write, which meant she wrote them from scratch. She remembered the hobby she'd developed in her spare time, a complex logistics algorithm she'd designed just to prove she could, which he'd laughed at. "Stick to the guest list, Sarah. Leave the real work to me." Her hand was trembling. Not from fear, but from a rage so cold and pure it terrified her. She picked up the cheap blue pen provided by the lawyers. She looked at Marcus. His smile was wide now. He thought she was broken. He thought he was watching her crumble. He didn't see the woman who had clawed her way to a full-ride scholarship to MIT. He didn't see the woman who had deferred her own PhD to support his fragile ego. He saw the wife, a domestic appliance he was trading in for a newer model. "Fine," Serafina said. She uncapped the pen. She signed her name, Serafina Hayes, one last time. The signature was firm, a sharp, angry line. She stood up. She didn't look at Marcus again. She left her own lawyer, Gwen, to gather the papers and walked out of the conference room. She didn't look back at the skyline, at the life she was leaving. In the elevator, the sterile silence was deafening. The panic she had held at bay for 6 months finally crested. She was 42 years old. She had a 1-year ticking clock and a resume that had been blank for 15 years. Marcus was right about one thing. He had won. He had taken everything. The ride down the elevator was a descent into a cold new reality. Serafina exited the polished lobby of the law firm and stepped onto the bustling street. The noise of the city hit her like a physical blow. Horns blared. People rushed past, their faces set in the determined masks of those with places to be, careers to build. She was adrift. She was supposed to call a rideshare, go back to the small, sterile two-bedroom apartment she'd rented, and what? Start boxing up the life she'd already lost. She walked a block, then another, until she found a small iron bench outside a public library. She sat, her hands clutching the designer handbag Marcus had bought her last Christmas. It felt like a prop from someone else's life. She had to inventory her assets. The lump sum was a joke. The alimony was an insult. What did she have left? Her mind. For 15 years, Marcus Hayes had been the rising star at Petrocorp, a mid-level energy logistics company. He was Marcus the Visionary, the man who'd streamlined their entire North American fleet. Except he hadn't. Serafina had. It started small. He'd come home complaining about inefficiencies. She, bored and missing the complex mathematical challenges of her former life, had taken a look. Marcus, if you just reroute the New Mexico fleet through the Dallas hub instead of Denver, you cut 18% on fuel costs. He'd presented it as his own idea. He got a bonus. It became their pattern. She was his unpaid, unacknowledged back-office strategist. She built the models. She ran the projections. She wrote the executive summaries. He took the credit. He'd convinced her it was teamwork. We're a unit, Sarah. Your success is my success. But as his star rose, his ego inflated. He stopped seeing her as a partner and started seeing her as staff. Then as his old lady. The breaking point had been Project Helios. It was her name for it. Her hobby. While Marcus was focused on cutting costs by pennies, Serafina had been looking at the future. Green energy. The problem wasn't generation, it was storage and distribution. The grid was antiquated. She spent 2 years in secret using the open-source data she could find, developing an algorithm. It wasn't just about shipping routes. It was a predictive AI-driven model that optimized energy flow from solar and wind farms to the grid, factoring in weather patterns, consumer demand, and even fluctuating storage cell degradation. It was brilliant. It was revolutionary. And she was proud of it. One night 6 months ago, she'd finally shown him. He was on his third whiskey, texting someone under the table. Marcus. She'd set her laptop open. I have to show you something. I think this could change everything. I call it Helios. He'd glanced at her screen, at the lines of code and the complex data visualizations. He'd scoffed. What is this, Sarah? More of your little spreadsheets, honey. It's cute, but it's not real. It is real. She'd insisted, her voice tight. It could create an entirely new division. It could save the company billions. Save the company. He'd laughed, a harsh barking sound. Kenzie, the name of his assistant. Kenzie just got me the new sales projections. That's what's real. Stick to the charity balls, honey. You're in way over your head. He'd dismissed her. He'd dismissed her life's work as a cute spreadsheet. 2 weeks later, she found the text messages to Kenzie. The sales projections were photos. The business trips were weekends in Napa. But the betrayal of the affair was nothing compared to the betrayal of his dismissal. He hadn't just broken their vows. He had tried to break her. He had erased her, minimized her, and locked her in a box labeled wife so he could feel like the man. Sitting on that bench, Serafina opened her handbag. She pulled out her phone, an older model, not the new flagship Marcus and Kenzie all had. She had one play left. One desperate last-minute 1 in a million shot she had taken 3 weeks ago when she realized Marcus and his high-priced lawyers were going to bury her. She'd done her research. She knew who the real players were in the tech and energy space. Not the peacocks like Marcus, but the sharks. The apex predators. And there was only one name at the top of that list, Damian Knight. Damian Knight was less a man and more a myth in the business world. He was the founder and sole CEO of Knight Vanguard Solutions, a private tech conglomerate that devoured industries and spat out streamlined, optimized, and terrifyingly efficient versions. He was notorious. He was ruthless. He didn't do meetings. He did summonses. He didn't read proposals. He read balance sheets. And he was pathologically private. He had no social media, he gave no interviews, and his photo had only appeared in Forbes twice, once when he'd made his first billion at 30, and once when he'd hostile takeovered the company that had fired him a decade earlier. Finding a way to contact him was virtually impossible. His corporate gateways were firewalled. His executive team was a legendarily tight-lipped circle. But Serafina was a researcher. She hadn't just been a math prodigy. She'd been a data mining expert. She'd spent 48 sleepless hours fueled by coffee and a burning desire for revenge digging through the digital bedrock. She'd found him. Not through a corporate email, but through an obscure alumni portal for an MIT coding symposium from 20 years ago. A username, DKnight, was still attached to an archaic forum. She'd gambled that the associated encrypted email address was still monitored, if only by a legacy server. 3 weeks ago, she had composed her cold email. Subject efficiency problem in green logistics. PENP, Mr. Knight. You don't know me. My name is Serafina Hayes. Your competitors believe the primary issue in green energy logistics is generation. They are wrong. The issue is predictive distribution. I have developed a self-learning algorithm that optimizes grid distribution by 18% over current models. This is a conservative estimate. It does not just manage flow. It predicts demand and optimizes storage degradation. Your company, Knight Vanguard, is the only one with the infrastructure to implement it. Everyone else, including my husband's company Petrocorp, is run by fools. I've attached the first 3 pages of the core code. I am in the middle of a contentious divorce. My husband, a VP at Petrocorp, believes this algorithm is a hobby. He is mistaken. I will be legally free, and this intellectual property will be mine and mine alone on October 31st at approximately 11 a.m. If you are interested, you know where to find the fools. I'll be the one walking away from them. S. Hayes. She never got a reply, not a rejection, not a, "This email is unmonitored." Just silence. She'd assumed it was a failure, a desperate, embarrassing Hail Mary. Now sitting on the park bench, her old life signed away, she felt the phone in her hand vibrate. A text message. From an unknown number. Unknown number, 43rd floor. Hartwell Dean. Was the 11:00 a.m. estimate accurate? Serafina's heart stopped. Her fingers fumbled on the screen. Serafina. Yes, it's done. A pause that lasted an eternity. Then the 3-dot typing bubble appeared and vanished and appeared again. Unknown number. My team analyzed your code. Your 18% estimate is wrong. It's 22.4% if you had access to real-time shipping manifests. You didn't factor in waveform optimization. Serafina. I didn't have the data. My access was restricted. Unknown number. I am aware of your husband. The Peacock. Unknown number. Stay on the bench. A black Bentley Mulsanne will be there in 2 minutes. Get in. We will discuss your future. Unknown number. And Ms. Hayes. Welcome to the real world. Serafina looked up, her blood roaring in her ears. She was terrified. She was exhilarated. She felt for the first time in 15 years completely and utterly alive. 2 blocks away, Marcus was exiting the elevator, his arm already around his lawyer. "Buy yourself something nice, Harrison," Marcus boomed, slipping him a tip that was more than Serafina's first alimony check. "That was a masterclass." "Just doing my job, Mr. Hayes," the lawyer smirked. "Now," Marcus said, pulling out his phone to call Kenzie. "Time to celebrate." He pushed through the lobby doors, whistling, stepping out into the sunlight of his new bright Serafina-free future. Marcus Hayes was on top of the world. He stood on the curb, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive suit, breathing in the city air. It smelled like victory. It smelled like freedom. His driver was pulling up in the Mercedes S-Class, a fine car, a symbol of his hard-earned success. He was just about to text Kenzie a picture of the signed divorce decree, a little "we did it, baby," when he saw her. Serafina. She was sitting on that pathetic little public bench just down the block. He almost hadn't recognized her. She looked smaller than he remembered, diminished. She was hunched over her phone, probably trying to figure out the Uber app. A wave of pity mixed with smug satisfaction washed over him. This is what she was reduced to. This was the brilliant woman who'd challenged him. A lonely figure on a park bench with a rapidly dwindling bank account. He'd done the right thing. He'd cut the dead weight. He smirked, raising his hand to give her one last pitying little wave. A final goodbye and good luck. He never got the chance. At that exact moment, a car slid into the curb directly in front of Serafina. Marcus paused, his hand still in the air. This wasn't an Uber. It was a Bentley Mulsanne. It wasn't just a car. It was a statement. A rolling bank vault. The paint was a black so deep it seemed to drink the light. The chrome was subtle, but it gleamed with the quiet menace of old money. Marcus knew cars. This was a custom job. A car that cost north of $500,000. It was the kind of car that he saw in magazines and dreamed of. A man in a sharp gray suit, not a driver's uniform, but a suit, emerged from the driver's side. He didn't rush. He moved with an unhurried, crisp efficiency. He walked around the back and opened the rear passenger door. And he held it. For Serafina. Serafina stood up. She looked at the car. She looked at the driver. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and got in. The man closed the door with a sound like a bank vault sealing, a soft, heavy thud. Marcus was frozen on his own curb. His jaw was literally hanging open. What the hell? His mind raced, trying to compute. Who was that? It must be a mistake. Maybe she'd ordered a black car service and got a lucky upgrade. No. Those cars didn't just wait on civilians. Maybe it was her lawyer, Gwen. No, Gwen drove a sensible 10-year-old Volvo. The Bentley's engine, which had been utterly silent, gave a low, powerful growl as it prepared to pull away. It had to pass Marcus to get into the flow of traffic. Marcus's own Mercedes was idling behind it, effectively blocked. His driver honked. Marcus waved at him to shut up. He needed to see. He stepped off the curb, moving closer to the street, squinting at the Bentley's heavily tinted windows. He had to know who was in that car. The Bentley slowed as it passed him, almost, he thought, deliberately. And for a fraction of a second the sun hit the rear window at the perfect angle, cutting through the tint. Marcus saw two things. First, he saw Serafina. She wasn't crumpled. She wasn't crying. She was sitting upright, poised, her face pale, but set in a look of intense, focused determination. Second, he saw the man sitting across from her. Marcus's blood turned to ice. His smug smile didn't just fade. It was ripped from his face, replaced by a mask of sick gray horror. He knew that face. Every executive in the country knew that face. He'd seen it on the one Bloomberg cover story the man had ever agreed to. The shark, the titan, the myth. It was Damian Knight. The Bentley glided past its engine, a low whisper of contempt. Marcus was left standing in the street, choking on the exhaust of a car worth more than his entire net worth. The Mercedes horn blared again. "Sir, are you getting in?" Marcus didn't hear him. He was staring at the disappearing car, a single terrible thought echoing in his brain. Stick to the charity balls, honey. What had he done? The inside of the Bentley was like the cabin of a private jet. It was silent, insulated from the city's chaos. The seats were hand-stitched leather, and the air smelled faintly of wood polish and power. Serafina sat opposite Damian Knight. He was not what she expected. He wasn't loud or flashy. He was dressed in a simple charcoal gray knit sweater and dark slacks. No watch, no jewelry. His power wasn't in his accessories. It was in his stillness. His eyes, a sharp piercing blue, seemed to analyze everything, strip it down to its component parts, and find the flaws. He was holding a tablet. He didn't waste time on introductions. "Serafina Hayes," he said. His voice was flat neutral. "Your math is compelling." "You said my estimate was wrong," Serafina said, finding her voice. It came out steadier than she expected. "It was," he said, tapping the screen. "You estimated based on public data sets. You were building a model without access to the machine. I gave your core code to my team at Vanguard. They ran it on our quantum servers for 1 hour." He turned the tablet and showed her. It was a 3D model of the U.S. energy grid, but it was alive. Data streamed in real time. "This is Project Helios," he said, using her name for it. "Your algorithm plugged into our data. You didn't just account for logistics. You created a self-regulating neurosystem. It's not a spreadsheet, Miss Hayes. It's a weapon." Serafina watched, mesmerized. "The waveform optimization, I couldn't solve it." "You didn't have to. The AI solved it for you. It taught itself. In the first 10 minutes it found inefficiencies in our own systems. It's already saved me $40 million in projected overstock." He turned the tablet off. The screen went dark. His full attention was on her. "So," he said, "let's talk about your ex-husband, Marcus Hayes, VP at Petrocorp." "What about him?" Serafina said, her guard up. "He's a fool," Damien said simply. "A peacock. All feathers, no brain. He presented a new logistics strategy to his board last quarter. My people acquired the presentation. It was sloppy. It was your work, but it was a bad copy. He'd stolen the engine but had no idea how to drive it. He dismissed it." Serafina whispered, the old wound feeling fresh. "Fools dismiss weapons." Damien countered, his eyes narrowing. "They're too heavy. I don't. Your divorce was finalized." He glanced at the car's dashboard clock. "Approximately 50 minutes ago, correct?" "Yes." "And your settlement. Did he claim any intellectual property? Any business ideas conceived during the marriage?" "No," Serafina said, a new dawning realization hitting her. He made me sign a clause specifically stating I had no part in his business, that all the assets he'd built were his alone. He wanted to make sure I couldn't touch his company." Damien Knight allowed himself the smallest thin-lipped smile. It was a terrifying sight. "He didn't just let you go, Ms. Hayes. He firewalled you. He protected your intellectual property for you. He put it in writing, signed and notarized, that your hobby project belongs 100% to you." He leaned forward. "He didn't just sign away his marriage. He signed away a billion-dollar company." The car was moving smoothly through traffic, heading toward the financial district. What happens now?" Serafina asked. "Now," Damien said, "we build. Knight Vanguard doesn't absorb. We incubate. I am creating a new independent subsidiary, Helios Dynamics. It will be your company. You will be the CEO. Me, I haven't worked in 15 years. You haven't been paid in 15 years? Damien corrected her, his tone sharp. There's a difference. You'll have the full backing of my resources, my data, my servers, my legal team. All you have to do is what you've already done, be the smartest person in the room." He paused, looking out the window as they passed a towering glass and steel building. "This, by the way, is your new office. We're taking the top 3 floors. He looked back at her. "There's just one thing, Ms. Hayes. My backing is not a romance. It is not a gift. It is an investment. I expect a return. You will work harder than you have ever worked in your life. You will not sleep. You will build this empire. And in 1 year you will make Petrocorp obsolete. You will crush them." Serafina looked at the man. He wasn't saving her. He was arming her. "When do I start?" she asked. "You already have," Damien Knight said. "Your first board meeting is at 2:00 p.m. The Bentley Mulsanne didn't so much drive as it processed. It was a black, silent void that moved through the chaotic traffic, parting it like the Red Sea. As it passed Marcus, he saw it all. The moment of eye contact felt like an eternity. He saw Serafina. She wasn't his mousy, discarded wife. She was something else, a stranger, cold, composed, and powerful. He saw Damian Knight, the man who had bankrupted General Motors' entire EV division as a hobby, the man who had bought the New York Times building not for the paper but for the antenna on the roof. And he saw them, together. The car passed. The tinted window obscured them once more, but the image was burned into Marcus's retina. His driver, oblivious, finally lost his patience. "Sir, Mr. Hayes, we are blocking traffic." Marcus stumbled back onto the curb, his limbs feeling heavy, his chest tight. The world had just tilted on its axis. "Sarah," he whispered the name, tasting like ash. His mind, which had been so clear and smug moments before, was now a frantic, panicked mess. He started running the calculations. Knight. Why is she with Knight? And then, like a lightning bolt, the memory hit him. Her hobby. The cute spreadsheets. The thing she called Helios. It could change everything, Marcus. "Stick to the charity balls, honey." His knees went weak. He leaned against a lamppost for support. It wasn't a hobby. It was real. The woman he'd just signed away for a pittance. She hadn't been meeting a new lover. She had been meeting an investor. No, not an investor. A kingmaker. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Oh, God, no." He knew how Damian Knight operated. Knight didn't buy companies. He gutted them. He identified a weakness and inefficiency, and he exploited it with surgical, brutal precision. And Serafina, she hadn't just found a weakness at Petrocorp. She was the weakness. She was the asset he had just quite literally thrown out with the trash. He saw his future flash before his eyes. His promotion. His partnership. His entire career. It had all been built on her work, on the foundations she'd laid. And now, she was taking her blueprints to the one man on earth who could build her vision overnight. He wasn't just going to be beaten. He was going to be erased. The smug smile he'd worn in that conference room felt like a mask of idiocy. He'd been smiling proudly, signing the papers while Serafina sat on a powder keg. And Damian Knight, the billionaire, had been waiting for Marcus himself to light the fuse. The full, agonizing, humiliating reality of the moment crashed down on him. He had been so focused on Kenzie's youth, he'd forgotten Serafina's brilliance. He'd been so obsessed with his own reflection, he'd failed to see the Titan standing behind him. The driver of the Mercedes got out and ran over. "Mr. Hayes, are you all right? Should I call someone?" Marcus looked at his driver, his eyes wide and vacant. He was a man who had just watched his entire world vanish in the polished reflection of a disappearing Bentley. He'd signed the papers. He'd signed smiling. And he'd just watched a billionaire drive his ex-wife away, not as a trophy but as a weapon. And she had looked at him not with sadness but with the cold, hard promise of what was to come. "I'm ruined," Marcus Hayes whispered to the indifferent street. "I am completely and utterly ruined." 6 months later. The world is not changed by grand gestures, Serafina had learned, but by the relentless, quiet application of pressure. The offices of Helios Dynamics, which occupied the 50th, 51st, and 52nd floors of the new Vanguard Tower, were a testament to this principle. The design was minimalist, brutalist, and beautiful. Polished concrete floors, raw steel beams, and entire walls of glass that framed the city like a conquered map. There was no warmth. There was only light, data, and purpose. Serafina's corner office had a view that stretched from the financial district to the ocean. She stood before it, not admiring the view, but analyzing it the same way she analyzed the real-time data streaming onto a holographic display projected in the center of the room. "The grid is stable," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Stability is a low-growth metric. a voice replied. Damian Knight was sitting in one of the two severe black leather chairs opposite her desk. He wasn't looking at the display. He was looking at her as if she were the data stream. Stability is the platform for growth, Serafina countered, not turning. The West Coast grid is optimized. Phase 1 is complete. And Petrocorp, he asked. Petrocorp is a bleeding elephant, she said, finally turning. The transformation was absolute. The soft-edged, quietly desperate housewife was a ghost. This woman, Serafina Hayes, CEO of Helios, was all sharp angles and controlled fire. She wore a tailored charcoal gray dress that looked like it was designed by an architect. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it emphasized the fierce intelligence in her eyes. The elephant is still thrashing, she continued. Their legacy contracts are a liability. Their pension fund is a time bomb. They're hemorrhaging their best engineers. We've poached the top two, Jennifer Lee from their R&D and Robert Chen from their data science division. They're bleeding, Damian agreed, a thin, satisfied smile playing on his lips. But they are not dead. Their board is stubborn. They're trying to rally shareholders, claiming we're engaging in predatory practices. They are painting you as a vengeful ex-wife. Let them, Serafina said, walking to her desk. She tapped a command and the holographic display vanished. They're personalizing their own extinction. It's a classic symptom of failure. They're not your target, Serafina, Damian reminded her, his voice low. The company is. You've isolated them. You've cut off their supply lines. When do you move in for the kill? I'm not here to kill them, Damian, she said, sitting down. She leaned forward, her hands clasping on the black onyx desk. I'm here to acquire them. Their infrastructure is outdated, but it's extensive. Their logistics arm is the last piece of the puzzle. Once we have it, we don't just manage the grid, we own it. They will never sell to you. The name Serafina Hayes is a curse in their boardroom. Which is why, Serafina said, we're not asking. The vote is in 3 days. They're pinning their hopes on a last-minute merger with Apex Energy. It's a pathetic, desperate move. And will it work? Serafina's smile was the one Damian had seen before, the one that meant the math was already done. Apex Energy just pulled their offer. They were persuaded that their investment was unsound. Their CEO, Mr. Wallace, received an anonymous data packet this morning outlining the true state of Petrocorp's pension deficit, the one Marcus forgot to ever properly fund. Damian Knight stood up. He was, for the first time in their 6-month partnership, genuinely impressed. She hadn't just built the weapon he'd asked for. She'd invented new ammunition. You're not a CEO, Ms. Hayes, he said, walking to the door. You're a conqueror. I'm just a woman who understands the math, she replied. And the math says Petrocorp is finished. My motion, which I'll be filing at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, is to initiate a hostile takeover. We will acquire their logistics division for 30 cents on the dollar. The rest of the company, we'll let it be carved up for scrap. Motion provisionally passed, Damian said, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. He opened the door. One more thing. The Future of Energy Summit. You are the keynote. I know. It's tonight, at the Cipriani. I'm aware, Serafina said, already pulling up the SEC filing. It was their flagship event, Damian said, pausing. Petrocorp has sponsored it for a decade. It was his favorite party. Serafina didn't look up from her screen. Her focus was absolute. How ironic, she said, her voice flat. He loved the parties. I loved the work. It seems we've both finally gotten what we wanted. Meanwhile, in a parallel universe of failure. The Camden Court apartment smelled of stale curry, damp carpet, and regret. It was a 400-square-foot studio in a part of town that wasn't up and coming, but long since given up. Marcus Hayes sat on the edge of a lumpy futon, which was also his bed, his couch, and his office. The room was a testament to his implosion. Empty whiskey bottles, cheap brands like Old Crow, cluttered a stained IKEA coffee table. Piles of unopened mail formed small threatening mountains. Most of them were red. Final notice. Account overdue. He was a man haunted. His expensive suits were gone sold for a fraction of their worth to a consignment shop. He now wore a wrinkled graying dress shirt and a pair of stained slacks. His face was puffy, his eyes perpetually bloodshot, his hands afflicted with a slight humiliating tremor. His phone buzzed. He lunged for it, his heart leaping with the pathetic, desperate hope that had become his only real companion. It was Kenzie. He hadn't heard from her in 5 months. Not since the day his assets were frozen in the corporate espionage lawsuit Petrocorp had slapped him with to save face. She'd vanished, taking the Cartier watch and the down payment he'd made on a condo for her. "Kenzie," he croaked. His voice was raw. "New phone, who dis?" The text read. "Kenzie, it's me. It's Marcus. Please, I need to talk to you." The 3-dot typing bubble appeared. He held his breath. "Oh, gross. Don't text me again." The bubble vanished. He was blocked. Marcus roared a sound of pure animalistic frustration and threw the phone against the wall. It shattered the screen's spiderwebbing before going dark. He was completely, utterly cut off. His downfall had been a public execution, fired for cause, sued by his former employer, blacklisted by every headhunter in the industry. The visionary of Petrocorp was now a toxic asset. He'd tried to get work. He'd even tried to get an entry-level auditing job at a small firm. The interview had lasted 5 minutes. The moment the hiring manager, a kid half his age, Googled his name, the interview was over. He was unemployable. He was ruined. And it was all her fault. Serafina. The name was a curse. He spat it. In his mind, he replayed the divorce. He'd been so smart, so dominant. He'd crushed her. He'd won. How had she done this? He knew the name Damien Knight. She hadn't just left him. She'd run to another man. A richer, more powerful man. She'd weaponized her feminine wiles, and used that billionaire to destroy him. It was the only narrative his ego could stomach. She hadn't beaten him with her brain. She'd cheated him with her body. He was the victim. He staggered to his small, grime-caked kitchen, yanking open the fridge. Empty save for a single warm can of beer. He cracked it open, the foam spilling over his shaking hands. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit here and rot. He had to face her. He had to make her see what she'd done to him. He fumbled with his broken phone, the screen barely responsive. He managed to get to his email. And there it was. A generic, industry-wide invitation. The Future of Energy Summit. Keynote speaker, Serafina Hayes. CEO, Helios Dynamics. Tonight, 7:00 p.m. The Cipriani. His event. His stage. She was keynoting his event. The one he used to host. The one where he'd give the big speech and she'd stand in the back smiling, holding his drink. The rage was so sudden and so hot it almost sobered him up. He stormed to his closet. He had one suit left. His funeral suit, he'd started to call it. A black Hugo Boss from his glory days. It would be tight. He didn't care. He would go. He would get in. And he would confront her. He would remind her of the 15 years they shared. He would remind her of the vows she'd broken. He would look that monster Damien Knight in the eye and he didn't know. He just knew he had to be there. He had to stop this. He had to get his life back. The ballroom at the Cipriani was a sea of power. Chandeliers dripped crystals, champagne flutes chimed, and the murmur of $1,000-a-plate crowd filled the air. Serafina was the calm eye of the storm. She wasn't mingling, she was holding court. A U.S. senator on her left, the CEO of Tesla's European division on her right. They weren't chatting. They were listening. She spoke quietly about quantum grid integration, and they hung on every word. Her grasp of the macro policy is astonishing. the senator whispered to an aide. Forget policy, the Tesla exec murmured. She solved the storage degradation problem. She's a decade ahead of us. Across the room, Damian Knight watched from a secluded balcony. He didn't network. He observed. He watched his prize asset rewrite the rules of an entire industry. It was the best investment he'd ever made. Into this world of order, precision, and power stumbled chaos. Marcus Hayes made it past the front door by sheer frantic audacity. He'd told the security guard he was checking the AV equipment for Ms. Hayes. His old stained suit, his wild alcohol-bright eyes, and the reek of whiskey coming off him in waves should have stopped him. But he'd used a name, Richard Chen, a low-level events guy he'd fired 2 years ago, and the guard busy with the crush had waved him in. He stood in the doorway blinking at the opulence. This was his world. This was his party. And she had stolen it. He saw her. She was radiant. It was the only word. She was laughing a real, genuine laugh at something the senator said. She looked younger than she had in a decade. She looked alive. She looked happy. And that was the final insult. He started walking. He didn't run. He moved with the terrifying, single-minded purpose of a man who had nothing left to lose. He pushed past a startled venture capitalist. He knocked over a tray of champagne. He was a creature of mud and filth in a room of polished marble. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice a desperate rasp. The murmur of the room died. 100 conversations stopped. The power of a collective awkward silence fell. Serafina turned, her smile fading not to fear but to a look of annoyance, the kind one might give a waiter who'd spilled a drink. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was cold, colder than the offices, colder than the grave of their marriage. "You're not supposed to be here." "Not supposed to be here," he said, his voice rising, cracking with hysteria. "This is my event. This is my life." He was 5 feet from her now. The senator had instinctively stepped back. 2 large security guards were moving, but Serafina, with a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head, waved them off. This was her problem. She would handle it. "This was your event, Marcus," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You, like Petrocorp, are part of the past." "The past. The past." He laughed, a high-pitched, terrible sound. 15 years, Sarah. That's our past. You can't just erase it. You can't do this. You seduced that ghoul Knight. You used him to destroy me, all because of Kenzie. Is that it? You're this vengeful, this bitch, all over a stupid fling." He was yelling now. His face was a mask of sweat and rage. Serafina waited perfectly still until his tirade ran out of air. The entire room was watching. She took 1 step closer to him. He was taller, but in that moment she towered over him. "Let me be very clear," she said, her voice not rising but cutting through the silence, "so that you and everyone here understand. First," she said, holding up a finger, "you think this is about Kenzie. You think I am a vengeful woman. You have always needed to see me as small. You need to believe this is about emotion, about jealousy. Because if it isn't, you'd have to admit the truth." "What truth?" he spat. "That you're a monster." "The truth," she said, "is that this was never about you. It was about the math. And the math. Marcus, you were just bad at it." She held up a second finger. "You call me vengeful. You say I used Damian Knight. You see this is your fatal flaw. You think everything is personal. You think I did this to you. You are a speed bump, Marcus. A rounding error. You aren't the reason I'm here. You were just the obstacle." I loved you," he whispered, his rage collapsing into a pathetic, desperate plea. It was his last card. "Sarah, please. I'm ruined. I have nothing. Look at me. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. I can help you. I know Petrocorp. I know the old systems. We can run this, together, like we were supposed to." This was the moment. The final pathetic display of his unshattered ego. He still thought he had something to offer. Serafina looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of emotion crossed her face. It wasn't anger. It wasn't pity. It was boredom. "Help me," she said. "You..." "The man who called my algorithm a cute spreadsheet." "I didn't know," he cried. "No," she said. "You didn't look. You didn't listen. You didn't see me. Not as a partner. Not as an equal. Not even as a person. You saw me as an accessory. A hostess. A mirror to reflect your own. What you thought was greatness." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "And the problem, Marcus, is you're not in the reflection anymore. You were never the visionary. You were just the guy who took my work to the office." She straightened up. "You are not ruined because of me," she said, her voice ringing out for the entire room to hear. "You are ruined because you are an arrogant, incompetent fool who valued his own pride over his own assets. You signed smiling, remember? You were proud to discard me." "Security," she said, turning away from him as if he had ceased to exist. "Please show this relic the door. He's obsolete." The two guards grabbed his arms. He didn't fight. He was broken. The words had done what no financial ruin could. They had flayed him to the bone. "Sarah, please," he whimpered as they dragged him stumbling out of the ballroom. Serafina watched him go. She then turned back to the senator, her expression instantly composing itself back into one of pleasant professional focus. "Now, Senator," she said, taking a sip of water, "as I was saying, the problem with the current infrastructure is not capacity, it's latency." From the balcony, Damian Knight smiled. He raised his glass, not to her, but to the brutal, beautiful, and utterly efficient C-suite predator he had helped unleash. 2 hours later, the 200 p.m. sports highlights were long over. The TV in the corner of the Salty Dog pub was now tuned to Bloomberg, the audio barely audible over the jukebox and the clack of pool balls. In the darkest booth, Marcus Hayes sat, his funeral suit now stained with something he hoped was ketchup. He had been deposited on the curb by security. He had walked 6 miles to this bar. His feet were bleeding. His throat was raw. His life was over. He was nursing a glass of the cheapest vodka paid for with the last $3 he'd found in his pocket. And then her face was on the screen. It was a special report. The Phoenix of Energy. A Bloomberg profile. He saw Serafina looking regal and sharp in her office. He saw her at the summit after he'd been removed, giving her keynote to a standing ovation. The anchor, a sharp woman named Anika Sharma, was wrapping up the glowing profile. "Ms. Hayes, this has been a meteoric and, for some, a brutal rise," the anchor said. "Your ex-husband, Marcus Hayes, formerly of Petrocorp, has been vocal. He was forcibly removed from your summit tonight, claiming this was a personal vendetta. Your response..." The camera zoomed in on Serafina's face. Marcus leaned forward, his hands shaking, his breath fogging the glass he held. "Tell them, Sarah. Tell them what you did." Serafina smiled. A polite, warm, media-trained smile that did not in any way reach her eyes. She tilted her head as if genuinely confused. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice dripping with polished sincerity. "A personal vendetta. That seems so inefficient." She gave a small, dismissive laugh. "It's a sad story, really," she continued, her tone shifting to that of a patient professor. "When a market leader fails to adapt, it's inevitable. Some people confuse innovation with revenge. They personalize their own obsolescence. I'm afraid I don't know a Marcus Hayes. I only know Petrocorp's failed management. A textbook example of legacy rot. And we've right-sized that." She leaned forward, her eyes bright and cold for the camera. "Now, Anika, if you want to talk about the Helios 3 quantum grid, I'd be happy to." The anchor, stunned by the cold-blooded precision, quickly moved on. In the bar, Marcus's glass slipped from his fingers. It didn't break. It just hit the table, the vodka spilling out, tracing a path through the grime. "I don't know a Marcus Hayes," he whispered. He wasn't just ruined. He wasn't just broken. He was erased. He had signed, smiling, thinking he was the victor. He had proudly watched a billionaire drive his wife away. He had mistaken an execution for a victory lap. He was the fool. He was the relic. He was the ghost at a feast he would never again be invited to, while the woman he had tried to bury had become the phoenix rising from the ashes of his dead, forgotten life. The bartender, seeing the spilled drink, yelled, "Hey, you're cut off! Get out of here!" Marcus didn't move. He just stared at the blank, dark screen of the TV, now reflecting his own empty, obsolete face. That signature wasn't the end of Serafina's story. It was the moment she was finally released. She turned the deepest betrayal of her life into the fuel for her greatest comeback. She didn't need a man to save her. She just needed an investor who recognized her genius. Marcus thought he was discarding a liability, but he was abandoning the very asset that made him powerful. And in the end, he was left with exactly what he deserved: nothing. If you were captivated by Serafina's journey from being underestimated to becoming unstoppable, please show your support. Hit that like button so I know you want more stories of justice and empowerment. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own worth. And most importantly, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. You won't want to miss the stories we have coming up next. Thank you for watching.
Welcome to our channel. We're thrilled to have you here as we dive into this gripping tale of how a millionaire husband chose his mistress over his pregnant wife, only to find shocking truths unfolding in a hospital setting. At the conclusion of this dramatic story, an unexpected twist proves that genuine love and determination can prevail even when betrayal threatens to break us completely. Curious about what ultimately happens to everyone involved? Be sure to listen to the entire story so you don't miss the final, heart-stopping moments. If you enjoy immersive, emotionally charged narratives like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. By doing so, you'll help us continue bringing you countless powerful stories that stir the heart and spark the imagination. Also, feel free to share your personal opinions and reactions in the comments section. We'd love to hear your perspective. Let us know where you're tuning in from too. Your support and feedback keep our storytelling community alive and thriving. So stay connected for more incredible tales yet to come. Kira Van Allen had always believed in the promise of fairy tales. As a young girl growing up in a small suburban enclave, she would lie on her bedroom floor for hours, poring over books about enchanted kingdoms, dashing princes, and heroines who ultimately triumphed over adversity. At night, she would flick on a tiny flashlight and huddle under her blankets, losing herself in stories that bristled with romance and hope. Perhaps this early devotion to dreams and storytelling primed her heart for the sweeping kind of love she thought she found in Hayden Scott. Their chance meeting occurred on a crisp autumn evening at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where Kira, then a slightly nervous children's book illustrator, had tagged along with a friend for a fundraising gala she was certain she didn't belong at. It was not her world of bright crayons, playful sketches, and kids' fairy tale illustrations. It was a realm of refined suits and little black dresses, of hushed chatter about high-stakes investments, vintage wines, and opulent summer homes in far-flung locales. Kira stood near a classic Monet, transfixed by brushstrokes that glowed under the muted lighting. Lost in the colors, she hadn't noticed Hayden's approach until his voice, warm and confident, interrupted her reverie. He pointed out an intricate detail in the painting and said, "Art reveals more than what the eye first sees." The casual remark told her he possessed both knowledge and humility, a combination that made her heart beat faster. Tall, with just a slight imperfection in his perfectly knotted tie, Hayden had a disarming, genuine smile that made Kira feel as though she were the only person in the room. They spoke for hours, ignoring the swirl of well-heeled donors. By the time the gala's live orchestra played its last waltz, she sensed that something extraordinary had just begun. In the months that followed, Kira discovered that Hayden was no ordinary man in a tuxedo. He was, in fact, a self-made millionaire who had founded a thriving investment firm called Hayden Scott Capital. Growing up in a modest household had shaped him into someone fiercely driven. Through an Ivy League business degree, unrelenting work, and bold entrepreneurial spirit, he'd built a fortune that allowed him to rub elbows with the city's elite. Yet what charmed Kira most was that he seldom boasted about his success. He asked more questions about her stories, her whimsical doodles, and the bright-eyed children she hoped her drawings would inspire. Hayden whisked Kira off on spontaneous weekend trips, offering her a first taste of private jets and five-star resorts. She had trouble reconciling her sense of wonder with the notion that this sweet, attentive man had that level of wealth. The tabloids began to catch wind of their growing romance. Paparazzi snapping pictures of the affable millionaire strolling hand-in-hand with the wide-eyed illustrator at exclusive events. After just a year of courtship, he proposed under a blooming arch of cherry blossoms in Central Park, the soft pink petals drifting around them like confetti. He said he couldn't imagine a future without her, and with tears sparkling on her cheeks, Kira said yes. Their wedding a few months later was held at a luxurious hotel that overlooked the entire city skyline. Society pages buzzed about the storybook union between the talented children's illustrator and her dynamic, high-flying groom. Even in that whirlwind, Kira felt safe, certain she had found the one who truly understood and valued her. She believed her life's trajectory was arching toward its most blissful chapter. If there were any shadows lurking behind Hayden's brilliant smile, she dismissed them as mere illusions. The honeyed glow of new marriage made everything else fade into the background. Soon they settled into Hayden's soaring penthouse, its windows framing a glittering expanse of skyscrapers and traffic far below. Kira would sketch at a little table by the window, imagining stories she'd craft for children who needed hope. Hayden, for his part, poured himself into managing his firm, but always carved out weekends for romantic brunches or short getaways. Indeed, for a while it seemed that Kira had found her forever. When she discovered she was pregnant, she reveled in the promise of a new life, a living testament to the love she believed they shared. But unbeknownst to her, the fairy tale's shadow side was about to reveal itself, setting in motion a betrayal that would shatter the carefully painted image of her happily ever after. From the moment Kira saw the 2 lines on the pregnancy test, her heart soared. She imagined their future child toddling along plush penthouse hallways, rummaging through illustrated books that Kira herself had created. She could already envision Hayden crouching down, teaching their little one about the wonders of color and shapes, maybe even guiding the child through a finger paint session if he had the patience. At first, Hayden seemed just as thrilled, lifting her off the ground and laughing so exuberantly she feared the neighbors might file a noise complaint. Kira convinced herself that their life was indeed the stuff of dreams. But soon, small worries formed cracks in her contentment. Late-night phone calls on Hayden's phone became a habit, and she frequently caught his tone shifting from casual to tense the moment he moved out of her earshot. She tried to quell any gnawing sense of unease by reminding herself that he managed global investments. Time zones, she told herself, investors in Asia. Yet deep down, a quiet alarm bell began to ring. Hayden's business had always required him to take calls and attend meetings at odd hours, but now he was slipping out of the bedroom more often than usual. Voice hushed to near silence. It wasn't simply the phone calls. Kira noticed the intangible distance that grew between them. Where he once texted her during the day, just to say he missed her or to ask how her morning coffee tasted, those messages became sparse. The shared laughter over small household jokes, the comfortable routine of cooking together on Sundays, the spontaneous midweek date nights, all eroded. She brushed it aside initially, chiding herself for being over-emotional due to pregnancy hormones. She'd read articles about how expecting mothers often feel insecure and anxious. This is normal, she reasoned, trying to maintain her faith in him. A more troubling change was his sudden flurry of business trips. Hayden claimed key negotiations required him to travel, sometimes at the drop of a hat. He'd fly out for days, leaving Kira alone in that lofty penthouse that felt colder and more cavernous with each passing hour. He'd call occasionally, a clipped sort of check-in. Are you taking your vitamins? Or is everything okay? He never lingered on the phone, never asked in detail about her doctor's visits or the sweet flutter she felt when the baby moved. We're doing million-dollar deals, he'd say. I'll make it up to you, he promised. But that promise began to feel as fragile as her uncertain hopes. One night, as her pregnancy neared its midpoint, Kira discovered the final, damning clue. Searching for an updated illustration reference in Hayden's laptop, a device she used occasionally with his permission, she found an open email. The subject line read, "Weekend at the Rosemont Suite, can't wait," and the sender was someone named Bella Brooks. Kira felt a cold jolt ripple through her body. A sense of dread washed over her, but she clicked anyway, heart pounding. Embedded in the thread were flirtatious messages discussing intimately shared evenings at a five-star hotel downtown, along with photos of Bella, tall, statuesque, and clad in expensive attire that left little to the imagination. Hot tears blurred Kira's vision. Her breathing grew ragged, and she felt a painful knot form in her abdomen, as though the shock physically manifested in her womb, threatening her unborn child as well. When she heard footsteps approach and the door creak open behind her, she swiveled around. Hayden froze in the doorway. In one awful moment, both of them realized there was no more hiding. He lunged for the laptop, but Kira jerked away, her face glistening with tears. "Who is Bella?" she choked out, the words tumbling with heartbreak and rage. Hayden mumbled a defense riddled with half-truths, an affair, a lapse in judgment. Yet he insisted it was nothing important. Watching him stammer, Kira's trembling hands hovered protectively over her stomach. His betrayal ripped her confidence apart. She'd spent years trusting him, shaping her life around his affections. Now he laid it to waste in an affair with another woman. She demanded he leave. The humiliation carved deep, and the trust once so vital felt irretrievably shattered. Hayden claimed he'd end it, that he'd been weak. Kira didn't believe a word. He moved out in the following days, drifting to a lavish hotel. Whether with Bella or alone, Kira didn't know. All she had was an echoing penthouse, a growing child in her womb, and emotional devastation so heavy it felt like quicksand. Yet she knew she couldn't succumb entirely. She had to keep her stress in check for the baby's sake. Her only anchor was that small life inside her, pulsing with fragile hope. As she locked the penthouse door behind Hayden for what she assumed was the last time, Kira felt an ache so profound that it threatened to consume her. But she reminded herself that no matter what, her child deserved every ounce of strength she could muster. Like a cruel echo of the heartbreak, reality came crashing in soon after. Kira's pregnancy was already demanding. She often felt fatigued, struggled with dizzy spells, and experienced more aches than she had anticipated. The emotional toll of Hayden's betrayal magnified every discomfort. Sleepless nights became the norm. She'd stare at the city lights through the penthouse windows, reeling from the thought of her husband in someone else's arms. By her 7th month, her body began to exhibit signs of overwhelming strain. She'd find herself breathing heavily after taking just a few steps. Persistent headaches hounded her, and her doctor started worrying about elevated blood pressure. One afternoon, as Kira knelt in the half-painted nursery trying to organize baby clothes by color, an activity meant to distract her from her heartbreak, she felt a piercing pain slash across her abdomen. She cried out, nearly collapsing against the wall. With trembling fingers, she dialed Marie, her closest friend, and the one lifeline she'd relied on since Hayden's sudden departure. Marie rushed over, eyes brimming with concern, as she helped Kira into a taxi bound for St. Raphael's Hospital. Upon arrival, Kira was immediately whisked onto a gurney, the neon overhead lights making everything feel clinical and surreal. She clutched her belly, terrified for her baby's life. In the hallway, a hurried nurse checked her vitals and gently but firmly told her, "We need to monitor your blood pressure. It's dangerously high." That was how Kira learned about the possibility of preeclampsia, a pregnancy complication that can be fatal if left unchecked. She had to stay in the hospital, bedbound, for close monitoring. The gravity of it only heightened her sense of betrayal. She was fighting for her and her baby's lives while her husband, presumably, was off with Bella, enjoying a carefree lifestyle. Days slipped by with unnerving monotony. Nurses glided in and out, adjusting her IV and politely urging her to stay calm. Kira tried listening to soothing music. She tried sketching on a pad, though her creativity had dwindled into a few half-finished doodles. The heartbreak was too raw, the tension too constant. Even so, her maternal instinct overpowered her despair. The moment she felt the baby kick, She'd place a hand on her belly and speak softly, telling him stories of a brighter future, even if she wasn't sure she believed her own words. Eventually, after dithering about what to do, she picked up her phone and dialed Hayden. He answered on the third ring. The conversation was stilted, marked by a chilling distance on his end. When she told him about her hospitalization, she half expected him to rush over, to at least show a flicker of alarm for their unborn child. Instead, Hayden's tone sounded harried, almost inconvenienced. He promised to check his schedule and swing by when he could. So, Kira hung up, tears burning her eyes, realizing the man who had once whispered sweet truths about love and forever might have vanished forever, replaced by someone callous and unrecognizable. After 3 agonizing days alone, Kira finally braced herself for Hayden's arrival, uncertain if his presence would bring comfort or more pain. The door swung open, and her heart froze at the sight of Bella, the other woman accompanying him. Bella's immaculate ensemble and coiffed hair felt like a stinging insult against the pallor of Kira's hospital gown and the dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, Kira could only gape, her mind stuck between heartbreak and rage. Bella had the nerve to step closer, arms folded elegantly. "I'm sorry if this is upsetting," she said, her voice lacking genuine remorse. Hayden tried to explain he wanted moral support, as if Kira's physical and emotional turmoil was a mere stage for them to show off their twisted sense of solidarity. The beeping machines around Kira sped up, reflecting her frantic heart rate. She screamed for them to leave, her voice cracking with grief. The nurse, alarmed at the dangerously high readings, stepped in and ordered them both out to protect the patient. Weak and trembling, Kira sobbed into her pillow after they left. She was pinned to this hospital bed by doctor's orders, fighting to keep her blood pressure under control for her unborn child. Meanwhile, Hayden demonstrated no regard for her well-being, parading Bella into her hospital room. That night, in the dim hush of the ward, Kira stared at the IV line that dripped medication into her veins and realized something dire. She could no longer rely on Hayden for anything. Not emotional support, not respect, not even basic decency. Her only refuge was the unwavering love she carried for her baby, and she vowed then that no matter how dark things became, she would fight for her child's future, even if it meant doing it all alone. In a twist of fate as astonishing as any tale Kira might have drawn in her children's books, life began to mete out a harsh dose of retribution to Hayden Scott. With his wife bedridden in the hospital, he continued to plummet deeper into a mire of poor decisions and moral bankruptcy. Word spread through the city's tangled web of finance that Hayden's firm was in peril. Some whispered it was just a temporary downturn. Every investment guru has off quarters. Others suspected something far more damning, hints that Winston Capital, later rebranded to keep reputations afloat, wasn't merely stumbling, but might be teetering on fraud. Meanwhile, Bella played the dutiful companion to Hayden's fraying facade of success. They still appeared at black tie receptions, where Hayden would do his best to schmooze potential investors, plastering on a smile that never reached his eyes. He spent lavishly to maintain the illusion that everything was under control. Yet behind the scenes, high-level clients were frantically withdrawing funds and demanding real answers about suspicious trades and obscure side deals that seemed to yield impossible returns. Employees at Hayden's firm exchanged anxious glances as they tried to keep up the charade, steeling themselves for a potential meltdown. The meltdown arrived with terrible swiftness when a prominent financial newspaper published an exposé. It dug into every corner of Hayden's meteoric rise, alleging that his returns were too good, too steady, far beyond normal market fluctuations. The article detailed how the Securities and Exchange Commission was quietly launching an investigation into possible misconduct, including misrepresenting investments or even shifting client money around to conceal mounting losses. The piece left little doubt. Hayden Scott's empire was built on shaky ground. Investors scrambled to distance themselves with panic-fueling abrupt phone calls. Office managers who once praised him as a visionary leader rushed to salvage whatever was left of their professional reputations. Legal notices began to flood in. One of Hayden's top advisors walked out, refusing to be complicit in a situation that he ominously described as ethically untenable. Bella, who prided herself on having chosen a winning partner, started to chafe at Hayden's growing sense of desperation. He had less time for romantic dinners, fewer expensive gifts, and his nightly anxiety soared to new heights. Amid this corporate and personal crisis, Hayden's guilt over Kira occasionally prickled at the edges of his consciousness. He'd recall the heartbroken look on her face, the child she still carried, a child he had vowed to love. Yet each time, he'd bury those pangs beneath layers of worry about legal ramifications. This unstoppable wave of investigations and lawsuits demanded his full attention. His attorneys advised him to liquidate assets in an attempt to pay off settlement after settlement. His private jets, luxury cars, and high-end art collection went under the auctioneer's hammer. The penthouse, where Kira had once awakened to a panoramic sunrise, was quietly put on the market. Then the final hammer fell. An early morning raid by the SEC and FBI. Agents swarmed the headquarters of Hayden Scott Capital, seizing computers, filing cabinets, and anything else that hinted at questionable practices. Shell-shocked employees watched men in dark suits escort entire servers out the front doors, a scene blasted across TV stations within hours. "I can't believe this is happening," one murmured to a local reporter, eyes filled with disbelief. That same day, a judge froze all of Hayden's remaining assets. As humiliating photos of a disgraced Hayden splashed across the headlines, Bella decided the writing was on the wall. Without a stable financial cushion or glamorous high society invites, Hayden had lost the luster that had drawn her to him in the first place. She quietly packed her things and left, never giving him a chance to talk her out of it. When the dust settled in the swirl of indictment rumors and investor fury, Hayden found himself alone in a drab hotel suite, living day to day on the pittance he could still access. All this time, Kira remained in the hospital, largely shielded from the spectacle of Hayden's downfall. Unaware of many specifics, she was preoccupied by her precarious health and the baby's survival. Yet it was impossible not to catch snippets on the news or see acquaintances whisper about it whenever she checked her phone. Though she'd never imagined she'd feel pity for a man who had betrayed her so thoroughly, a strange numbness crept over her. She no longer recognized Hayden at all. He was a cautionary tale, a sensational media headline. But heartbreak has its own turning gears. Even while confined to bed, she couldn't help but wonder if all this was part of a cosmic balancing act, that maybe the karma she had prayed for in her darkest hours was unfolding in real time. Kira's body, already under siege by stress and elevated blood pressure, finally surrendered to crisis mode. Late one morning, just as she tried to eat a bland hospital breakfast, an excruciating headache struck. Her vision blurred, and a wave of nausea forced her to clutch the bed rails, calling for a nurse. Machines beeped in alarm as her vitals went haywire. Doctors rushed in, exchanging terse words that Kira could barely process. She recalled hearing the word preeclampsia multiple times, a condition that could spiral into eclampsia or other severe complications if not addressed immediately. Dizzy, disoriented, Kira felt her consciousness dip in and out like a flickering candle. At some point she heard, "We need an emergency C-section to save them both." Fear reverberated through her, but her protective instincts for her unborn child overshadowed all else. She whispered, "Please, just do whatever it takes to keep him safe." Moments later, she was rushed into an operating room under bright, unforgiving lights. The last coherent thought she had was a mental picture of her baby's future, a life in which he could smile, run, and grow without any knowledge of the heartbreak that had preceded his birth. When Kira finally came to, it was hours later in a recovery ward. A kindly nurse stood by, gently explaining that her baby boy, whom she would later name Ethan, was alive but premature. His condition was stable, though he needed extra support in the neonatal intensive care unit. Kira, exhausted and tender from surgery, burst into quiet sobs of relief. She was a mother now. She'd do whatever she could to ensure Ethan thrived, even if the father who had turned her world upside down was nowhere in sight. In the subsequent days, Kira practically willed herself to regain strength. She begged the nurses to let her see Ethan in the NICU. They obliged once she was stable enough to move. Dressed in a hospital gown, hair messy from restless nights, she navigated the corridors with the help of a wheelchair, determined to meet her son face to face. There he was, impossibly small, lying in an incubator, with monitors and tubes attached to his fragile limbs. The sight filled Kira with a tidal wave of awe and protective love. She pressed a trembling hand to the incubator's transparent wall, whispering words of comfort. Tiny as he was, Ethan curled his miniature fingers around hers, demonstrating a will to hold on to the world that had just welcomed him. Hayden's appearance came days later, and even then, it was anything but reassuring. Kira was propped up in bed when he entered her room, wearing a solemn expression. She hadn't known what to expect. Her anger had cooled into something resembling resolved distance. He asked about Ethan in halting phrases, as if searching for the right words to say. Kira felt her chest tighten with bitterness and exhaustion. Of all the times she'd needed him, he was now showing up, battered by life's own retributions. But she'd lost the strength to rage. Her focus was on healing and caring for the baby. Though Hayden made vague attempts to apologize, the conversation felt more like a negotiation than a genuine act of contrition. He mentioned how he wanted to make sure she had the support needed, but there was no warmth in his tone. This was a man under siege, legally, financially, and morally. Kira gleaned from his tense posture and half-finished sentences that his world had collapsed. At that point, she offered him no solace. She merely nodded, too drained for conflict. When he finally left, she sagged against her pillows, staring out the window at a gray cityscape that mirrored her mixed sense of relief and sorrow. Within days, Kira was discharged but chose not to return to the penthouse that had held so many painful memories. Instead, she moved in temporarily with Marie, who offered a spare bedroom. It was cramped, but it felt safer. A warm cocoon where she could focus on Ethan's needs. She spent hours just holding him, his gentle breast reminding her that new life could spring from even the deepest devastation. In that humble setting, far from the penthouse's glitz, she began to piece herself back together. If the downfall of Hayden Scott had been swift, the subsequent fallout was slow and torturous. The once envied millionaire was soon mired in lawsuits, forced asset sales, and relentless questioning by authorities. During that tumultuous phase, Bella's departure only added salt to his wounds. Once she realized the entire empire was crumbling, she lost interest and slipped away. No more dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, no more diamond-studded gifts, no reason to stay. Meanwhile, Hayden was left scrambling to avoid criminal charges. His lawyers negotiated deals that might keep him out of prison in exchange for substantial financial penalties and a promise never again to helm an investment firm. He spent nights in a modest corporate apartment, bare walls, flickering overhead lights, little more than a desk and a bed. While the rest of the city gobbled up sensational headlines about his epic collapse, Hayden grew reacquainted with humility. The hush of those empty rooms gave him time to think about what he'd done to Kira and their newborn son. He remembered the day he'd held Kira's hand under that cherry blossom tree, promising her a life of security and wonder. He thought about the lonely hospital bed she had occupied, pregnant and in jeopardy while he flaunted his affair. The weight of his choices sank in like a stone in his chest, and shame became his constant companion. Yet it wasn't until he felt the last of his finances slip away, the penthouse sold off at a loss, the accounts frozen or emptied by legal fees, that he decided he had to confront the mess he'd left behind. Kira had known nothing but heartbreak from him for months. Now with Ethan in the picture, Hayden wondered if he even had the right to ask for forgiveness. Some nights he'd draft text messages but never send them, or he'd pace in circles, phone in hand, wanting to call but terrified of her rejection. In truth, Kira had no illusions about reconciliation. Freed from the hospital, she found herself forging ahead with resolute determination. She rented a small studio apartment of her own, a space that once might have seemed meager, but now felt like a sanctuary for her and Ethan. She could no longer live with Marie indefinitely, and this humble place, with worn-out carpet and creaking floors, was still miles better than the sorrow-laden penthouse. She hung a few of her favorite illustrations on the walls, turning the living area into a cozy spot where she could feed her baby and find moments of peace. She also returned to her craft, resuming her role as a children's book illustrator on a freelance basis. Though she juggled this with sleepless nights and diaper changes, she found solace in painting bright, imaginative worlds, places far removed from her real-life drama. Financially, it was a struggle, but for once, her money felt like it was her own, earned with her talents, untainted by the complications of Hayden's empire. By the time Ethan reached 3 months, Kira had carved out a delicate stability. Then one afternoon, while Ethan dozed in a cradle, her apartment buzzer startled her. She peered through the peephole to find Hayden, disheveled in a way she'd never seen him. Hair unkempt, suit rumpled, eyes shadowed with regret. She hesitated but finally opened the door, though she didn't invite him in. "Kira," he said softly, voice trembling just enough to betray his composure. I had to see you and the baby." She steeled her posture, crossing her arms. "You've ignored us all this time," she replied, her voice low. "Ethan's been fighting to grow healthier every day. I've handled it on my own." Hayden pressed his lips together. "I know I have no excuse. Everything fell apart. My life, my business. Bella, I lost everything. But I'm not here to make you feel sorry for me. I just want to see my son." Reluctantly, Kira allowed him a few steps inside. He blinked at the cramped living room, the battered coffee table strewn with baby toys and sketchbooks. It struck him how far removed this place was from the lavish home they once shared. Kira led him to where Ethan lay, cooing at the shapes that danced above his crib. Hayden's breath hitched as he saw his son. In a hushed gesture, he slipped a finger into the infant's grasp. Ethan clutched it unconsciously, and Hayden's eyes brimmed with tears. "He's perfect," he whispered. Kira stood watching, arms folded more from self-protection than anger now. She knew she could not hide Ethan from his father forever. Yet she also remembered the heartbreak, the hospital bed, the betrayal so profound it had almost ended both her and her child's lives. Hayden turned back to her, voice catching. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I can't even forgive myself. But I beg you to let me be part of his life, in whatever way you see fit." She regarded him for a moment. Behind the tired eyes, she glimpsed a broken man, a far cry from the confident billionaire who had swept her off her feet. "I won't shut the door on you and your son," she said softly. "But I also won't forget what you did. We'll see where we go from here, step by step." Hayden nodded, tears falling quietly. For a fleeting second, Kira wondered if this was a glimmer of redemption or just another chapter in a tragedy that had yet to conclude. Over the following months, Kira discovered fresh reservoirs of courage she never knew existed. She was no longer the naive dreamer who believed love alone could fix any storm. Trials had shaped her into a mother who protected her son fiercely, a woman who valued honesty and empathy over shiny promises. And so she set firm boundaries where Hayden was concerned. They established visiting days, during which he could spend time with Ethan, while respecting Kira's own emotional space. She made it clear that if he failed to show up or reverted to any manipulative behavior, she would cut off access until he proved he was ready to be a stable presence in Ethan's life. Surprisingly, Hayden complied, perhaps haunted by the catastrophic mistakes that had cost him nearly everything. He approached fatherhood with a diligence Kira had never seen in him before. Though strapped for money and forced to sell possessions he'd once flaunted, Hayden started working as a junior consultant in a small financial advisory firm. It was humble work, a far cry from the empire he once commanded, but it was honest. The pay was modest, but it allowed him to secure a tiny apartment on the city's outskirts and provide child support in the form of small, steady contributions. In time, he also apologized in a way that felt genuine. He told Kira, voice subdued by shame, that he'd let greed and vanity consume him. She listened, not offering immediate absolution, but sensing that this was at least an honest reflection. For the sake of her son, she allowed the conversation to unfold. That was part of her new life philosophy, open communication, but never letting her guard down enough to be harmed again. Ethan blossomed, hitting each infant milestone with a fervor that made Kira's heart swell with pride. By his first birthday, she had managed to gather enough savings, plus help from her illustration contracts, to move into a slightly larger apartment. Its main feature was a small balcony where she could set a potted herb garden and a chair for reading. She decorated Ethan's room with whimsical murals of forests and talking animals, a testament to her artistry and love. Marie, who had stood by Kira through every tearful breakdown, became a beloved auntie to Ethan, occasionally babysitting so Kira could focus on deadlines or simply enjoy a short break. Hayden, too, was invited to that first birthday celebration. The event was simple, a tiny living room filled with a few close friends, some homemade cupcakes, and a single balloon arch. Hayden arrived dressed more casually than Kira had ever seen him. Jeans, a worn button-down, and sneakers that had scuff marks. He came bearing a small toy and a birthday card scrawled with shaky handwriting. "Happy birthday, Ethan. Love, Dad." The hush that fell was thick with memories of heartbreak, but Kira forced a small nod of acknowledgement. She stepped aside to let him see his son gleefully smashing cake into his chubby cheeks. That day, there were no grand apologies or sweeping gestures. Instead, there was a quiet acceptance. Each person in the room understood that while the damage done might never fully heal, life continued forward. Kira wasn't certain what label to place on her relationship with Hayden now. Somewhere between distant co-parents and two people trying, in their own flawed ways, to put pieces of themselves back together. In a rare moment of reflection, Hayden privately thanked Kira for letting him be part of Ethan's birthday. "I know it couldn't have been easy," he murmured, eyes downcast. Kira merely shrugged. "This isn't for you. It's for Ethan." Their gaze locked for a moment, each acknowledging the fragile truth. The father-child bond was separate from the tangled wreckage of their adult relationship. Amid the quiet hum of the small party, Kira realized she felt neither bitterness nor a naive surge of affection for Hayden. She felt something else, a calm sense of resolve. She had emerged from a labyrinth of betrayal and emotional ruin, forging a sense of self that was stronger, more resilient, and wholly dedicated to nurturing Ethan's well-being. Where once heartbreak might have consumed her, she had found purpose in unconditional love for her son, and in building a stable, honest life that required no illusions. Yes, she still carried scars from Hayden's betrayal, and any mention of Bella or the extravagant betrayal in that hospital room could trigger old pains. But with each new illustration she completed, each gentle rock of Ethan's crib, she reaffirmed her decision to move forward. Hers was a future shaped by sincerity, by the fundamental knowledge that if a partner truly cares, they stand by you, especially in your darkest hour. For his part, Hayden was left with the daily confrontation of consequences, living in an unremarkable apartment with no adoring mistress to call him brilliant, no investors to shower him with praise. Yet he also had a glimmer of something akin to redemption, a son who recognized him, little arms occasionally extending for a pickup, producing a gurgling laugh that seemed to say everything that words could not. It would never erase the past, but it might carve a slow, winding path towards something better than the hollow chase of wealth and ego that had once consumed him. And so, for Kira, the hospital drama that began with heartbreak had ended in a new chapter of empowerment. She didn't regret learning the harsh lessons that shaped her motherhood and her sense of self. In her little apartment, with her paintbrushes and bedtime stories, she discovered that real love cannot be purchased, betrayed, or faked. It must be earned through steadfast devotion and a willingness to protect what matters most. For that, no million-dollar deal or glittering mistress could ever be a substitute. As our tumultuous story wraps up, it leaves us with one lingering question. Can new beginnings truly rise from the ashes of deceit? Even after everything that happened, the betrayal, the painful hospital stay, the downfall of fortune, small signs of redemption begin to blossom. Yet the answers are never as simple as we'd like. Sometimes healing demands acceptance, personal growth, and the strength to walk away from old illusions. We invite you to witness every raw moment that led to this cliffhanger finale. By exploring the full narrative, you'll see how heartbreak and renewal mingle in a storyline worthy of any binge-worthy drama. Don't forget to subscribe so you can follow our channel for future stories that tackle tough moral questions and keep you at the edge of your seat. Let us know what you think of this unexpected conclusion in the comments, and tell us how you experience each twist and turn. We're here to share powerful, thought-provoking tales, and we can't wait to hear what you have to say.